Professor Elvis NGOLE, former government minister, member of the Central Committee of the ruling Cameroon People's Democratic Movement, CPDM political party, coordinator of the CPDM Academy and political scientist. Thank you for accepting to talk to us today.
Thank you, Mr. Babela, for paying us a visit and organizing this conversation or this exchange. Our role is to interact with the public, enrich ourselves in the process, and acquire some education. After all, in an interactive process, everybody gets educated. So it's always a pleasure for me to play the role of pedagogue and at the same time Republican, so that I can learn from you, you can learn from me. Your audience, it's a wide audience, can learn from the question, can learn from my answer, and all of us will be better off as citizens of this great republic.
Now, there have been a lot of debates, controversies, convergent and divergent opinions expressed here and there about the democratic state of Cameroon. You must have heard a lot of people saying that Cameroon is not a democratic state. Cameroon is, some have even gone as far as saying that Cameroon is a monarchy. Cameroon is an autocratic state. You are a political scientist. Tell us, is Cameroon a democratic state?
Yes, without being a militant of any party, I have to say, without any doubt at all, that Cameroon is indeed a full democracy, which is growing and evolving, but it has all the pillars, all the ingredients, and I think even the will, the desire is there. And when you observe, since democracy came back to Cameroon and with the advent of President Biya into the Supreme Magistracy, we are on the right path. We are moving along the lines of making this country a true, genuine democracy. We are not old yet. There are democracies that are much older than us. There are democracies that are much larger than us. But to answer the question, is Cameroon a democracy? Naturally, obviously, without any doubt, empirically, meaning scientifically, measurably, Cameroon is, verifiably even, Cameroon is a democracy that is evolving, and it is evolving in the right direction. Yes, Cameroon's democracy has its issues, like all democracies do. There is no democracy in the world which doesn't have issues. But the issues of democracy or challenges of democracy does not unmake democracy. But those who, either by virtue or because of the issues of democracy or the challenges that they face of democracy, jump to the conclusion that Cameroon is not a democracy, either they are saying so out of frustration, or they are saying so out of ignorance, or they are saying so out of kind of denial, or just bad faith, because Cameroon is not an autocracy. Cameroon is not a dictatorship. Cameroon is not a monarchy. And it's good for people to know that a monarchy is not an undemocratic state. There are monarchies that are also democratic states. And examples of monarchies that are democratic states, I can give you many European monarchies are democratic states, including the one you know very well, the very old one, the United Kingdom is a monarchy, don't forget. It's a monarchy, but it is a democratic state because it's a constitutional monarchy. Japan is a monarchy. It's a constitutional monarchy. Thailand is a monarchy, but it's a constitutional monarchy. Yeah, and you can name many, but Cameroon is a republic, not a monarchy. A monarchy is a type of political system in which he who governs, or the power to govern, is drawn from the blood lineage or from the family lineage. The people don't decide who governs in a monarchy. It is the decision as to who governs in a monarchy comes from the family or blood lineage of the original leader, and it continues all the line, generations after generation. But Cameroon is not that. In Cameroon, he who governs, no matter at what level, whatever level, is decided by the 30 million citizens of Cameroon in a free, fair, open, legal, constitutional election. And once that is the case, as it is in Cameroon, that is one of the pillars of democracy. It's a free, competitive, fair election based on freedom. Freedom to choose.
You're going to tell us more about the pillars of democracy later in the program, but I want you to respond to this. Those who think and suggest that Cameroon is in an autocratic or in a dictatorial system sustain that argument, substantiate that argument by highlighting what you have called the issues of democracy, notably issues like violation of human rights, issues like corruption, embezzlement, mismanagement of public funds, repression, and all of those things which we are seeing, of course, happening in Cameroon, with political parties always under some kind of repression over issues of public peace and things like that. So what is your response to such arguments?
Yeah, as I said earlier, there are issues of democracy, the issues or challenges of democracy or problems, just to make it understandable to the common man, do not define and do not necessarily constitute a situation of non-democracy. And obviously do not necessarily, because of problems or issues, do not necessarily make a democracy a dictatorship or an autocracy. You know, I mean, you are talking to someone who has taught and has been a long time, not only a political science professor, but have been a long time professor of comparative political system, or what some people call comparative regimes. Look, a dictatorship is a political system in which one man, generally unelected, but even if he's elected, decides everything. He is the law. He is everything. And his will or his decision prevails over everybody's decision. He is the court, he is the National Assembly, he is the judge, he is the police, he is the gendarme. That's a dictator, and usually that sort of dictatorship is undemocratic. An autocrat is the same. I mean, it's the same word actually. It's a synonym of dictatorship is autocracy. Autocracy is a political system in which one individual is the alpha and omega. He is everything. He decides everything. His word is everything. And often it tends to be abusive or excessive. And Cameroon is none of those, because Cameroon is, on the contrary, not a dictatorship, not an autocracy, not a monarchy, because what I've just described does not prevail in Cameroon. What you have in Cameroon is a democracy that is referred to in political science as a democracy of the liberal variant, meaning a liberal democracy. A liberal democracy is the type of democracy in which the political system, meaning the republic or the state or the nation, if you want to use that word, because some people might have difficulty saying, what do I mean by political system? The political system is a nation or a state which, according to its laws or its founding law, meaning the constitution, is either, it can be a republic, the constitution will say so, it can be a monarchy, the constitution will say so, or it can be a theocracy, the constitution will say so. In the case of Cameroon, from the founding of the republic, the founding fathers, who were visionary and who were wise, had decided that based on the declaration of our independence in 1960, our people and our nation called Cameroon will be a nation in which it is the people who will determine who will govern them at every level. That is why the state that was created from 1960, the Republic of Cameroon, under the constitution in 1960, was that constitution referred to as the Republic of Cameroon, meaning a political system in which it is the people, citizens, not anybody else, in their sovereignty and in their freedom, who decide through elections to elect who governs them, mayor, regional president or regional councillor, senator, parliamentarian, president, and so forth and so on. So this is what the people decided from the word go. So we are a republic from the word go.
In the autocratic system, or in the dictatorial system, there is one person whose word is law.
Is law,
who decides on everything.
Yeah.
Now, what is your understanding of the fact that in Cameroon, the president of the republic is the head of the Higher Judicial Council. The president of the republic is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. The president of the republic is in every word spoken by every government authority, so to speak. In other words, every time the minister is speaking, the government authority is speaking, make reference to the president of the republic. As the president said, on her instruction, everything is according to the president.
No, in the case of Cameroon.
Does that not look like a dictator?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. First of all, you are referring to what, by your question, you are referring to the powers granted to the president of the republic, head of state, chief executive of the republic, by the constitution of the republic. These are powers given to him. But those powers are not dictatorial powers. They are not autocratic powers because according to our constitution, which is a republican constitution, which is a democratic constitution, because that is what it said since the 1960s, by the way. At some point, we became a one-party system and somehow went a little off of that. But with the advent of President Biya in power in 1982, he announced that, and by 1990, he put Cameroon back on the path of that liberal democracy. And by your question, you are referring to those powers, which the constitution, which is a liberal constitution, a republican democratic constitution, by the way. In fact, the most democratic and the most human rights conscious constitution Cameroon has ever had in 65 years. You are describing or referring to the powers granted to the president of the republic in his capacity as head of state and chief executive. And those powers do not make him an autocrat or a dictator, because those powers do not make the president, he is not the general of the army or the lieutenant or the colonel. He is not the judge or supreme judge, chief of the Supreme Court. He is not the president of the National Assembly. He is not the president of the Senate. So the powers you are referring to are constitutional powers given to he or she who, in our democratic and republican setting, is elected or has been elected as president of the republic, but that does not make him an autocrat or a dictator, because he is not, first of all, given his political manifesto, given his political vision and political philosophy, which you all know, given his political program, given our constitution, there is no iota of democracy.
You said no iota of...
No iota of autocracy or dictatorship, because the fact that he has those powers, which you have just referred to, president of this or president of that, but he is not the one who judges a case in court. He is not the one who administers a war or a conflict situation. He is not the one who adopts law in parliament or in the Senate or in the National Assembly. He is not the one who deliberates in a regional assembly or in a regional council when they decide. He is not the one who deliberates and decides when a council, in a local council under the mayor, meets. He is not the one who decides in a village where there's a village fund or a village chief or a village ado. He does not have those. Whether a dictator or an autocrat is someone who exercises absolute powers. But in the Cameroon setting, as it is the case in the setting of all the liberal democracies, particularly in republics such as Cameroon, the president of the republic, in spite of those powers, or with those powers that you just indicated, given to him, by the way, given to him by the constitution of the republic. But in the case of a democrat, in the case of an autocrat or a dictator, the powers are not given to the president. The president confiscates or seizes those powers. That is the difference here. In the case of the powers that you just referred to, they are constitutional powers which are given to he or she who is president. And if he's not president, he doesn't have those powers. But those powers do not make him dictator or autocrat because he didn't seize them.
We've been hearing narratives suggesting that the Constitution has been tailored to give dictatorial powers to the President of the Republic, so to speak, to give those powers that you're talking about, because they are constitutional.
They're constitutional.
He is the head of the commander-in-chief of the armed forces.
Yeah.
It is constitutional.
Yeah.
He is the head of the judicial council. Yeah. All of those powers are constitutional.
Yeah.
But now, the argument is that the Constitution has been tailored to give the President of the Republic a lot of powers that tend to make him a dictator.
Well, you're using the word tend to.
Influencing every decision, right down to the appointment of directors of state corporations, parastatals.
Appointing powers, particularly in the presidential system, are appointing powers. In many liberal democracies, such as ours, the appointing power of the president, if it's a presidential system such as ours, which is we refer to in Cameroon as semi-presidential system. Well, a semi-presidential system is a kind of presidential system. That means it's a system of governance in which the Constitution gives certain powers or overwhelming powers to the President of the Republic. But again, I insist, it is the Constitution. Now, if you are referring to that, which is a Republican Constitution, by the way, now you are referring to that Constitution as a Constitution which was tailored to give powers to the President of the Republic. I say this with regard to that question. That Constitution, if you refer to it as tailored, it is only someone who doesn't know the history of constitutionalism or the history of constitutions in Cameroon. You know that Cameroon has had, since 1960, about 4 constitutions. 1960, 1961, 1972, and 1996. This is what Cameroonians should know. And of all these 4 constitutions, the most democratic, the most human rights conscious, the most freedom oriented, which gives many liberties to civil society, to individuals, to social categories, is the 4th constitution, which is the 1996 constitution. And that 1996 constitution, as a republic, it is still the constitution, a republican constitution, a democratic constitution, where even the powers of the president are relative to many other powers. First, the president, as I just said, is called a semi-presidential, which means that some of the president's powers have been delegated to a head of government that we call the prime minister. In an autocracy, in a dictatorship, that does not exist. And in the constitution before, that did not exist. That tells you, that's the first thing. The second thing I want to tell about the 4th constitution, which is the 1996 constitution, is that that constitution gives, not only gives, has deliberately, purposefully created human rights institutions. As you know, there is a National Human Rights Commission, which was not the case in the previous constitutions. That constitution recognizes the powers of the civil society. In previous constitutions, that was not the case. That means that constitution gives extensive powers to you and I, citizens, to take whoever you want to take to court, to seek justice wherever you want to go, to decide on an election day that you are not going to vote for X or Y, the president or not. You have those powers. That is how liberal, that is how human rights conscious, that is how freedom conscious the present constitution is, which is the fourth constitution of Cameroon. For anyone there to say that the constitution was tailored to suit an individual, that person either has not read about or is not aware of the previous three constitutions to be able to know how liberal and this constitution is compared to the first three constitutions. And also that person does not want to be fair or does not want to be objective, because sure, there is no constitution in the world that is perfect. In fact, we tended to refer to the American Constitution as being one that is perfect, but Americans are humble enough, I like them, because they are the first to tell you that we are always seeking to be perfect. We are not yet perfect. We are looking for a way to be perfect. So that is the way we too should be humble to say.
I want you to give a response to an opinion. You must have heard some Cameroonians saying that because you talked about the Prime Minister,
yes,
who is exercising some of the power
delegated to him by the President.
Now, you must have heard some Cameroonians say that the Prime Minister is a speech.
Well, that's a word
that he decides not.
No, that is a word. To use that word is first of all unfair to say that a functionary of that level, where he's exercising delegated powers of the president, that word, you know, in our culture, it's not fair to use certain words. I mean, to say it's stooge, it's not a right way, it's not the right language. That's inappropriate a word to use. And I think it's empirically wrong, scientifically wrong, politically wrong, because the Prime Minister of the Republic is recognized by the Constitution. And if the Prime Minister is recognized by the Constitution, how can someone then say, what is a constitutional provisional disposition? One uses the word stooge. I don't think that is, I don't think it's fair, and I don't think it's correct to say so, because the Constitution is a fundamental law. It's a serious thing, and it's not just a constitution which it is the most democratic, the most republican, the most liberal constitution Cameroon has ever had, and many countries will say it that way. And if in the position of Prime Minister, who is that personality, whom the Constitution recognizes, and exercising the role of head of government, meaning the president, in his powers, as constitutional powers as president, recognizes that the Constitution allows him to designate a Prime Minister and who will exercise the powers of head of government and Prime Minister. That is not a position of a stooge. That is a position that is of responsibility, high responsibility for that matter. That's a position of very great of great political power, and we should take it that the Constitution didn't make a mistake, and the President cannot make a mistake by respecting the Constitution, and therefore the Prime Minister, in the capacity as Prime Minister and head of government, is doing his job legitimately, legally, managerially, and is doing it appropriately and correctly. And for anyone, because either you expect more, or you expect something else, or because you don't agree with something that the Prime Minister does or ought to do or is not doing, you cannot then conclude or jump into the conclusion that, oh, it's not a position of relevance, and you begin to use such words which we only use in colloquial circumstances. You cannot use such word in the context of in a context of civility and of values, because that's a functionary, a personality who exercises some of the powers that the president has delegated to him.
The Horizon reports that international anti-corruption crusader Barrister Kerimuna said 2016 must be our year of moral rearmament. Cameroon Insider highlights President Paul Biya's commitments to improve on the living conditions of Cameroonians, as mentioned in his end-of-year address to the nation, December 31st, 2025. According to the Guardian Post, Professor Victor Barca advocates has expressed fears that without a deterrent move in the context of endemic corruption and embezzlement, the 50 billion francs CAV youth entrepreneurial support announced by the President of the Republic might be diverted to individual pockets. The dawn, lions unleashed their might to tame South Africa. The paper reports the victory of the indomitable lions of Cameroon over the Bafanas of South Africa to make their way to the quarterfinals of the ongoing Africa Cup of Nations in Morocco.
Take us through the pillars of the democratic system.
That's very good. Democracy, by definition, as we teach in political science, and as we teach those who teach constitutional law, I'm sure say so also. Then in political science, we teach democracy. If you want to use the American democracy, which is of Abraham Lincoln, or the Lincolnian definition, is democracy is the government of the people, by the people, for the people. That's that simple. Meaning, democracy is a government that belongs to the people, conceived by the people, it is for the people, and it is the people themselves who run it. It's a system of government where a people run democracy. Meaning, it's the people who decide about it. It's the people who decide on the laws. It is the people who decide on the institution. It's the people who decide on enforcing the law. It's the people who decide on everything. But what that definition, the Lincolnian, meaning Abraham Lincoln, the great American president who gave that definition, he was right, by the way, because we teach it. What that definition does not tell you about democracy is that it does not tell you how the people do it. Now, in political science, other political scientists try to go to the extent of telling you how they do it in another definition, which is not actually contrary to the Lincolnian definition. We say democracy is a system in which the people decide through elections, by their participation, they decide on the institutions, they decide on the policies, they decide on the laws, they decide on policies, they decide on who does what, when, and how. This is scientifically for you to bring it down. That means that the people decide on, first, the foundations of the society. And in that foundation, the foundation law, or I should say, the foundation of that society is the people who decide it. And the foundation is always the first law, which is called, in law and in political science, the Constitution. Or you can say the founding law, or the supreme law, which is generally the supreme law. The Constitution is the first act after a people declare themselves a sovereign people, a sovereign society, which is a state or a nation. The Constitution now, which is the first law, decides how that state, how that country, or how that nation will be governed. And generally, as a democracy, because it is the people, they decide, therefore, through that Constitution to create the government as the first institution. And in creating that government, they decide who does what in that government. And it is the Constitution which decides, and in most constitutions in the world, particularly liberal, republican, democratic constitutions, it is the Constitution that decides that the government will be will have three branches generally. That is almost a universal rule. The government will be a trinity. The executive, meaning the executive government. The legislature, meaning the parliament. The parliament can be bicameral, which means Senate and the National Assembly or House of Representatives, or the government can be unicameral. The parliament can be unicameral, which means just one chamber. It is the Constitution that decides how the court system or the judiciary system will be organized, and it is that creates the judiciary as a power. So the executive is a power under the Constitution. The Parliament is a legislative power, and the judiciary is a legislative power. It is still the Constitution that decides how the people, therefore, will relate, the relationship between the people as citizens and each of those powers. It is the Constitution that decides how the people, the ordinary citizens, will relate to the executive, meaning the president, the government, and the ministries, and so forth. It is the Constitution that decides how the people will relate to the Parliament, meaning who will become parliamentarian, who will become senator, who will become deputy. It is the Constitution that tells you how the citizens will relate to the judiciary, meaning the Supreme Court, and so forth and so on. It is the Constitution that says this. It is the Constitution also that creates other institutions that do different duties. For example, in our case, it's the Constitution that will tell you that create the Constitutional Council, create Higher Judicial Council, create this or create that. The Constitution does that, and the Constitution states how the people, therefore, will relate. In other words, it is the Constitution that decides how to elect those from the president, meaning those exercising executive powers of the state. It is the Constitution. So it tells you that it is the people who on a particular day or a particular date will choose the candidates who will go for an election of the office of president. It is the Constitution that tells you who the people will choose to be a candidate for the office of senator, for the office of deputy. It is the Constitution that tells you how the Supreme Court is organized and how the Supreme Court functions. All is in the Constitution. That's why we say, for those who have studied Constitution, the functions of every Constitution in every constitutional republic, constitutional state, are the following. 1. The Constitution defines the liberties of every citizen and their limits. 2. The Constitution defines the organization of government. Government, in this case, not the government in its the government in its trinity. It is the Constitution that defines the government, meaning who is chief executive, what is chief executive and what is its role, what is parliament and what is its role, what is the judiciary and what is its role, and what is the role of the other institutions. It's the Constitution that defines that. It is also the Constitution that defines what is the relationship between the citizens, the ordinary citizen like you and I, and these institutions. The citizens know that by creating the Constitution, which is their Constitution, and by having the Constitution that defines the role of each of the institutions that have been created and the relationship between the citizens and those institutions, the country functions on the basis of that constitutional organization. And the people who have created the Constitution abide by the very Constitution they themselves have created. They don't violate that Constitution. They follow. That Constitution becomes like a Bible. It's almost like a Christian or a Muslim cannot afford to violate the Bible or the Quran. You cannot do that. Because it is well, the Quran or the Bible, we say is God's word. But the Constitution is the word of the people. Right. And it's the people who have conceived it, and it becomes like a political Bible of the citizens of every nation. And they follow it thoroughly. And the government, therefore, is organized, meaning in terms of hierarchy, in terms of institutions, and it functions according to what the Constitution says, and the people simply follow their own instincts, follow their own will. So we tend to define a Constitution as the expression of the collective will of the citizens of a particular country. That is how we refer to a Constitution. It's the expression of the collective political will of the citizens of a country. And once they have expressed that will is couched in what is a Constitution. And that Constitution is a foundation stone. You don't just change it anyhow. And particularly in a democracy, which is a liberal democracy like in Cameroon, you don't just change the Constitution anyhow. But guess what? If it were in an autocracy, and in a totalitarian or in a dictatorship, we will not be saying that, because a dictator, an autocrat, does not care about that.
Right. Right now.
But in Cameroon, we do care. And the president and all others functionaries care. Right. And they respect, as you know, our president respects the constitution a lot and the laws a lot. You know this yourself.
You talked about the three arms of the state.
Of the government.
The executive,
of the government.
The executive,
the legislature, and the judiciary.
And these three work together in or under the principle of separation of powers.
Exactly.
Tell us more about this principle of separation of powers.
I'm very glad that you asked. You've asked it from someone who is, I like to rather be humble enough to say, a student of American political science. I studied political science, and that's what I've been teaching, and I've taught it for since the 1980s. In American political science, the principle of separation of powers does not mean separateness of power, and does not mean...
What's the difference?
No, that's good. I'm glad that you are insisting. It does not mean non-collaboration. It does not mean conflict either. This principle of, it's a question that we have asked, and students have asked over the years in class, in courses, introduction to political science, American state and local government, and so forth. The difference is that the principle of the separation of powers, in all its understandings, is that each of the arms of government, the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, work as the Constitution expects of them in institutional conscience, in institutional autonomy, in institutional purposefulness, as an institutional mission to serve all of them. Each of these branches, constitutional branches of government, serve only one purpose. They serve the state. They serve the republic. And as you know, the state and the republic are the same thing, by the way. The head of that state, of that republic, is the elected, or not elected, the president of the republic who is elected by the people. And so in their organization, which is set by the Constitution, they function as members of the same republic, members of the same state, members of the same destiny, members of the same family. And in carrying out their work, in functioning, they don't fight with each other. They don't engage in conflict with each other. They don't run away from each other. They don't show animosity towards each other. Rather, what they show is, they show complementarity, they show collaboration, they show institutional understanding, institutional cooperation, and it allows the state, which is the republic, to continue to benefit from them in the principle of separate but equal. I don't know why you say but equal. They cannot be equal, first of all. When you say equal, I mean they are equal before the Constitution, before the law. There. But the separate but equal principle does not make them separate from one another. They are not 99% of the time. It doesn't matter which country you take, by the way. It doesn't matter which liberal constitution you look at, Republican constitution. There's a lot of complementarity. There's a lot of understanding.
Complementarity in independence.
In independence. Complementarity in independence. But that independence, again, people misunderstand what the word independence is. People take the word independence to lens which is not. The independence here is not a sovereign independence whereby you are a wall, a distance.
It's not a kind of isolation.
Isolation from the other. No, they are not in isolation from one another. They actually, on a daily basis, because they have one mission, they have one destiny, they are of one family, meaning the state of Cameroon, or the state, or the republic. They have an institutional conscience which is wonderful, which is exceptional. They are men and women who, first of all, they are either elected or they are appointed, depending upon the political system there is and the system of government. And they never ignore, they never lose sight of the fact that even though I'm in the executive, meaning the government, or the other in the parliamentarian, meaning in parliament, or the other is the judiciary, they don't fight with each other or against one another. They don't quarrel with one another. They don't run away or create wars or conflict with one another. Most of the time, they seek understanding, collaboration, complementarity for the good of only one thing, the family, for the good of the state. When I say the family, I mean the national family, the nation, the state, the republic. And naturally, he who heads that family, he who heads that state, he who heads that republic is the head of state and the head of the president of the republic. And what happens is he benefits from that genius. He benefits from that wisdom. He benefits from their expertise. He benefits from their goodwill. He benefits from their consciences. He benefits from that because he knows that it is the value of the Constitution. It is the Constitution is at work. Each person is working in their institutional capacity, but they're not working apart from the other. They're actually working knowledgeable, conscious of the fact that they have one destiny, one promise, one future, one nation, one republic, one state at which there is one head. And it is the people of the people of that republic, of that state, of that nation, who are their how shall we call them, shareholders, or they are the people, the reason for which they are doing the work they are doing. So 99% of the time, people tend to refer to the principle of separate but equal. In the American setting, that is used mostly in American setting, American political setting, or American political science, as if people who don't understand it will say, oh, they're supposed to be independent. They're supposed to be equal, as if and they're supposed to even be sovereign.
Not influenced by the one.
Or they're not influenced by the other. They're not supposed to be influenced by the other. But understanding is not influence. Complementarity is not influence.
You give us an
collaboration is not influence. Working in collegiality is not influence. Because you have one mission, you have one destiny, you have one future, you have one head, you have one nation.
Buying AK-47s on both sides of the fight to come and fight each other, brother fighting brother. Buying armor cars, littering them on the streets of Bamenda and the streets of Boya, as what we are seeing as of today. It doesn't make sense. It tells of a leader who have chosen not to listen to the voice of his people. Cameroonians are killing Cameroonians for no just cause. The military option will never bring a lasting solution to it, because this thing is in the vein, it is in the spirit of the people. We have been opting for the voice of reason, and that voice of reason can only be a dialogue, not a CPDM made dialogue. A dialogue that Cameroonians should talk to themselves in sincerity, in love, in truth, in reconciliation.
I think the problem of Cameroon is not about the government. The problem of Cameroon is about the method, it's about the mindset, it's about the measurability of targets. You know, if you put Cameroon practice what we call rotational government, not new government, because when we talk about the new government, it doesn't really exist in the Cameroon dictionary. It's rotation. Today, Minister of Education, tomorrow, Minister of Agriculture, the next day, you are the Minister of Sports and Physical Education. That's rotational government. What we need is people who have methods, who have a mindset that works, and who have a measurable target.
Give us an understanding of the human rights pillar of a democratic state. You started talking about the Constitution.
Yeah.
The Constitution is the mother law. You have other laws like the Criminal Procedure Code, the Penal Code. You have international legal instruments like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and many other international legal instruments duly signed and ratified by Cameroon. Give us an understanding of this important component of democratic practice, which has to do with the respect of human
rights.
rights,
Yes.
civil and political rights.
Exactly. In our democratic practice on a daily basis, because democracy is a living behavior, a living comportment of the citizen, based on or flowing from the fact that they are sovereign, they are a free people, and their constitution that they have put in place recognizes that, and they are following that constitution and flowing from that constitution on their daily basis, given the institutions that the constitution itself has created, one of which, or such as we said, the executive government, the legislative government, the judiciary government, the judicial branches of power, the commissions such as, let's say, Human Rights Commission, Constitutional Council, and others. The people, in their daily basis, relate to these institutions, and in this case, as you've asked the question, the human rights area. Because you have a constitution which is very human rights conscious. The Constitution of Cameroon, meaning the fourth constitution, when I say, because we have had other constitutions, 3 before. The fourth constitution, which is the 1996 constitution, which is the current constitution, as I said earlier, is the most human rights conscious constitution Cameroon has ever had in 65 years. It's so human rights conscious that there is a human rights commission, National Human Rights Commission in Cameroon, which has men and women who are experts, men and women of caliber, men and women of conscience, and men and women who are patriotic. They work in their consciences, their expert consciences, their national conscience, their patriotic conscience, and every time they meet, they ensure that the human rights of Cameroonians are protected. And guess what? There is no army, there is no police. The president, not even the judicial power, or the executive, or the parliamentary, legislative power, can tell them not to do that. Because the Constitution recognizes that. That they have that mission, they have that responsibility, and they do it in their consciences, and we have to appreciate them for that. And in doing that, who benefits? It's you and I, the citizens benefit, the nation benefits, the state, the republic benefit, and the Constitution is given its true value. And because of the human rights consciousness of the Constitution and the institutions that have been created, such as the Human Rights Commission, even the other institutions that have been created under the Constitution become human rights conscious. The Parliament is human rights conscious with its legislative power. The executive, meaning the executive government, is conscious, headed by the president. The president is the chief executive. The ministers, everybody, they're conscious of human rights. Of course, the judiciary, they implement, they apply, they enforce, they dispense the law every day. That is their business, and they are men and women of caliber and of great expertise. The Constitutional Council does same in matters of elections and referenda. And because of the human rights conscious value of the Constitution, the citizens of Cameroon, conscious of the fact that the Constitution gives them their human rights a lot of value. If you notice that, I mean, I don't have to be the one to teach you or to remind you about that. Watch in the streets of Cameroon. Cameroonians are very conscious of their human rights, and they tend to want to exercise it a lot. And guess what? Cameroonians understand that, hey, if anyone jokes with their human rights, they can walk up to the judiciary and see someone to court. They can go to the Human Rights Commission and complain. Cameroonians do this, and they do it very readily. I'm sure you know this. And because of that, that makes people feel more freer. It makes people feel very conscious of their dignity as persons and as human beings. And guess what? The President of the Republic, who is the head of state and the chief executive, promotes the human rights in his policies, in his manifesto, in his political program. In fact, I like to tell people, as a student of his political philosophy, he expounds this all the time. There is no speech, there is no political discourse that the president makes without ensuring a paragraph on the value of the human rights of his citizens, his co-citizens. He always makes sure that is the case. And so I wanted to say that there are those, for example, and it's of course I can say, who, for one reason or the other, get into trouble with the law. And when they get into trouble with the law, I'm not saying that they are bad people or they are wrong, but for whatever reason, they get into trouble with the law. And when anyone, any citizen, it doesn't matter, in fact, I shouldn't say it doesn't matter. In all liberal democracies, with liberal constitutions such as Cameroon, when a citizen, any citizen, it doesn't matter who, because there's no citizen above the constitution in a liberal democracy. When any citizen gets into trouble with the law, guess what? The institutions in place do their job. They apply the law. They implement the law. And they apply the law and implement the law the way they understand it in their expertise, in their institutional consciousness. They apply it. And the tendency is that for those citizens who in their problems with the law are found guilty or they are found culpable, naturally they're not happy. Naturally they get frustrated. And naturally they criticize. And the tendency is that such citizens who are so frustrated or who have been found culpable, and in their frustrations and in their anger or in their unhappiness, then to jump to such, I don't want to say cheap, but such conclusions that, oh, there is no justice, oh, there is no human right. Well, they are free to do so, but they are not necessarily right. Because in all liberal democracies, and you can quote anyone, there's no exception. People always, at a certain time, fall foul of the law. And when they fall foul of the law, the tendency is that the institutions charged with the enforcement of the law will do their job. They will apply the law, they will implement the law. And when the law is implemented or is applied, sometimes it favors you, depending upon the interpretation or the verdict of those who are responsible for that. Or sometimes it doesn't favor you. But when it doesn't favor you, there's always room. Because we live in a liberal democracy and the constitution is a human rights conscious democracy. There is always room. You can always appeal to the next level. You can keep on doing it. You can always appeal all the way to the Supreme Court, by the way. You can do that. You can even, because we are, and you made reference to that, you may even, in case you think you are not satisfied with the highest court of the land, which is our Supreme Court.
Go to the international.
You can, because our constitution permits for the citizen to be able to have such liberty. Right. That is how human rights conscious our constitution is. It allows you.
In the practical dimension, Prof, yeah. You talked about implementation.
Yeah.
In that perspective, when you look at the fact that in Cameroon, human rights violations have become almost the order of the day, normal thing that happens every now and then. Truck drivers were taken to the streets, blocking traffic between Lagos and down the road, police harassment, and then their trucks being cast off the road and destroyed. A lot of these things happening everywhere. And then you have also issues about, I know you definitely not agree with those who say that in reality there is only one arm of government in Cameroon, the executive, that is set, who have swallowed the legislature with an oppressed majority, the ruling party, the judiciary, that seems to be under influence, that seems to be under what some have qualified as the yoke of the executive, even the Minister of Justice, sometime this year or last year, raising concerns about influence peddling and judges having issues doing their job as they ought to do. And when you look at all of these, I'm taking us back to where we started. And you comfortably say that all these pillars that you just explained, these pillars of democracy, is that the reality? Is that what is happening?
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that there are some, I guess, some citizens or some groups that will, out of either frustration, out of denial or bad faith or something, or because they want to play to the gallery, jump to the conclusion and make the case that because there was an abuse here and there, or because someone did not get what they consider to be justice on their side, therefore they conclude that there is no democracy, or they conclude that there's only one, as you say, there's only one authority, or there's only one power or something. No, all that is wrong. That is, people who do that are people who either they are engaged into, out of frustration, they become victims of their own frustration, or they want to mislead others. The Constitution has not changed. It's the same Constitution. And the Constitution in no way tells you that that there's only one authority, there's only one power. It doesn't say that. And there is so much freedom and there is so much human rights consciousness that even he or she who makes that sort of cheap or that sort of very incorrect conclusion about the state of affairs should humble themselves and try to ask themselves the question, how honest are they to make such conclusions? The truth of the matter, empirically, scientifically, measurably, the truth of the matter is that if you're not satisfied, the Constitution is your partner. And the head of state has sworn to respect that Constitution. That's why it takes. And given his political philosophy, he has made it that it is in our political culture, it is in our legislation, no matter what institution you take, to make sure that that Constitution is respected. That means that you shouldn't be quick to criticize or to conclude that, oh, there's only one power, there is no, because the head of state is liberal enough, is constitutional enough, is respectful enough of the Constitution, and he doesn't in any way stop, prevent, you use the word influence. He doesn't tie the hand of an expert soldier, an expert judge, an expert journalist like you or like other, an expert parliamentarian, or an expert engineer who is a minister of something, or an expert judge or whatever. In fact, the head of state is so liberal and so constitutionally oriented and minded that, guess what? Because of the Constitution, and given the Constitution, or because of the value of that Constitution, as you know, in spite of all the noise you hear, the legal profession, and in particular, the Cameroon Bar Association, is more powerful today than it has ever been in 65 years. You know the rest. They do what they do.
Many think that the bar has rather shifted backwards.
Of course, the bar has the right.
Bar president, Barrister John Dobla, late Barrister John Dobla.
Yes.
Many are thinking that the bar has kind of taken some backwards.
No, how could the bar take backwards? Because every day the bar is barking, the bar is talking, the bar is...
The bar president, Barrister Bar Eric.
Barrister Bar, I followed him yesterday.
The bar is doing its job.
The bar is doing its job. And guess what? The bar is doing that job. Thanks to, the bar is what it is, powerful as it is, and doing what it's supposed to do. And I think they're doing what they're supposed to do. Thanks to what? Two factors. One is thanks to the Constitution, which is a human rights constitution, which is a Republican constitution, which is a democratic constitution. Two, thanks to the political vision, thanks to the political program, thanks to the political will of the chief executive, the head of state, and president of the republic. Because that is his political program, that is his political philosophy. He does not want the value of the constitution to be tampered with or to be mortgaged. And I think this is good for the future of our country.
Take us through the responsibilities of the people in a democratic system, in the governance of a democratic system.
In a democratic system, because a democratic system is a people-driven process. It's a people-driven system, as I described it, whether it's the Lincolnian version you take, or the scientific, very scientific version, empirical version. The people, by virtue of the definition of democracy, have the following responsibilities. One, you must always show love of country. You cannot do without. You cannot be sovereign, a people with a sovereign constitution that you put in place and laws that flow from that sovereign foundation. Is like you can't run away from your house that you built. The foundation is there. If because there is whatever seku, they call it troubles, you cannot run away from the foundation. You built it. So the people have the duty, the obligation to be faithful and to count on and depend on their country, on their fatherland. I love to say, I should say to students of political science, a fatherland. You can also use the word motherland, by the way. It is because we're in a patriarchal society that we say fatherland. You can also say motherland because it's a land of both your father and your mother. Would you say your father and mother were wrong? Of course, you cannot say that simply because you are frustrated, because you have a problem. No. You must show love of country because it's the land of your father and mother in a democracy. In fact, in a non-democracy, meaning in a totalitarian state or in a dictatorship, which we are not, it's a crime if you're not patriotic, if you don't show love of country. But in a liberal democracy, it's liberal, you're free. But you are reminded by the Constitution and other laws that, you know, the minimum which is expected of you is that at least show love of the land in which your mother and father gave birth to you, and that is your state, your nation, and so forth, which is your republic. Two, you have a responsibility to participate because it's a democracy, it's a people-driven, you and I driven process, you and I driven system. You must participate. It is not French people, Americans, British who will participate for you. The decisions that are made, whether to elect somebody in the executive branch, to elect somebody in the legislative branch, to elect somebody in the judiciary branch, to elect somebody in the regional assembly or council or in the local council, depends on you. If you don't participate, you are absent. And as you know, there's a saying, those who are absent are always wrong. Don't put yourself on the wrong side of history by being absent. Participate. That is why we, all of us, sensitize, educate Cameroonians to register in the voter registers, because voting is an element of participation, is one way, one form of participation. Third, your obligation is you yourself have to give respect to the Constitution and the institutions which flow out of that Constitution. Because the Constitution is your Constitution. If you don't give respect to it, if you don't give respect to the institutions, if you don't give respect to those who have been elected or called upon to animate these institutions, you're going to give to whom? Why would you think that you are doing a great job if you give respect to the president of another country or a functionary of another country, but you don't do it to your own country? If you don't do it to your own country, who will do it for you? And if you don't do it to your own country, you're not helping yourself. You are actually hurting yourself, because if you don't respect your people, don't expect others to respect them. So you need to respect your laws, respect your institution, and respect those who participate in them. And fourthly, you need to develop a culture, a mentality that is appropriate, that can enable you to move forward, that can enable you to overcome problems, that can enable you to be more creative and create solutions to your problems. And that mentality is anything but pessimistic. That mentality is anything but negative. That mentality is anything but quarreling, grumbling, cursing. No, that mentality is what? A political culture. A political culture which is constructive, optimistic, civil, respectful of the freedoms of others, and open to a future full of sunshine, a future of brightness, an optimistic future. That's your obligation. That's a minimum. I mean, there are other obligations, but that's a minimum. In other places, you expect to, in some countries, it's a must that you must participate in serving in the army. You know, some others you must participate in a community help in the community. You must be a volunteer in something. There are others.